Today on the Spring Hills podcast, it's part one of the story of Spring Hills. Every Wednesday for the next 4 weeks, we will release an episode covering a different chunk of time in the history of Spring Hills Church. Today, Bret and Eve share about the few years prior to the official launch of the church, as well as what that first year was like. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait to hear more about it, so I hope you enjoy the story of Spring Hills. Welcome to part one of the highly anticipated story of Spring Hills. So over the next month, we're going to be releasing 4 different episodes, all covering different chunks of time in the 28-year history of Spring Hills. Can you guys believe it's been 28 years?
I can't believe it.
Does it seem like does it been a blur?
Cannot.
And now you just heard a voice that is new to the podcast. Most people know Eve, and Bret, you're a seasoned veteran of the podcast now.
Yes, let me introduce my wife.
There you go.
This is Eve, who's going to participate today in sharing the story of Spring Hills. Welcome, Eve.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Bret.
The goal here
Garrett.
is for us to find out more about how the church got started, and 28 years is a lot of history, so we're going to start from the very beginning. And I feel like first, though, just Eve, just in case people might not know exactly who you are on campus, because you're not in front of people as much as Bret is, right? Let's just find out a little bit about you. Where are you from?
I grew up in Woodside, California.
Okay, and what's your main role on staff here now?
My main role on staff is working with, right now it's 3 to kindergarten age children.
And you are famously the voice of Bowie.
Bowie.
Who has been mentioned
I
on this
love
podcast many
Bowie.
times. Do you get recognized to your voice at all with the kids?
No,
'Cause
because
you
I
didn't
don't
change
use
it.
that voice.
Yeah.
Hey,
And then
everybody,
Do you
need
want
to
me to
go.
use that voice today?
You need to go on YouTube and you need to check out the children's videos, Spring Hills Church.
the preschool.
The preschool. And
Hi, kids.
There it is.
There it is. There's Bowie.
That's been impersonated on this podcast before.
Oh, it has.
And then my last question for you, Eve, before we jump into the Spring Hills history is, are you excited about being on the podcast?
I am
Oh, good.
because of the topic. I need to keep Bret in check.
Oh, yes.
I
Okay, so
usually
He
mess up
deviates
some
from the truth.
details.
okay, so you're gonna rein him in.
Fact
All right.
checked.
So since you two are the dynamic duo, I don't know if you heard the intro that I did, the trailer I did for this. I called you the dynamic duo. I started to compare you to Jordan and Pippen and that kind of stuff, right? But I'm not sure this story would be complete if we didn't hear exactly how the duo got together. So let's start there. How did you two meet?
Well, again, Eve is here to fill in the
blanks.
details, the fact-checking. Eve and I met in a band. She and her 2 sisters had a trio, and they were looking for a drummer, and we had a mutual friend. The mutual friend told Eve and her sisters about me, and I went up and auditioned for the band many years ago.
Did he make it the first time, or
He
did you?
did make it
good.
the first time.
So you
Yeah,
thought
it
he was a good
amazing.
drummer.
Yeah.
And Eve, you're a bassist.
Yes,
That's
true.
it. How long did you play the bass for?
Since high school.
So Bret, you and your brothers had a band.
Yes.
So did you guys
dr-
ever combine?
No.
No, that would have been a great tour.
That's the dream, huh?
That would have been a great tour. So I ended up playing drums in the band.
What was the
trio,
band name?
Star, Dawn, and Eve.
Oh.
So it was the 3 names of.
I don't think I knew those were your sisters' names.
Yeah,
Yes.
Star, Dawn. Their actual names.
They're actual names, right?
And so I played in the band 4 years, I guess. Fell in love with the bassist.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
And so did that cause the breakup of the band?
No.
No.
You hear that with bands all the time, like there's some relationship. But
Brett went off to seminary.
Yeah,
were you both interested in each other right away, or were you just friends?
Friends.
Okay.
I was interested.
You were interested. Eve was hesitant. And then, so you went off to seminary, and then did you date after that? Did you follow him to Dallas?
The year after he graduated, I moved to Dallas.
Okay. And that's where the dating started.
Well, we sort of, we have an interesting story. That would be a subject for a whole new podcast.
We can skim over that. We'll get to.
But essentially, I went down to Dallas Seminary and to train for the ministry, and then Eve came to Dallas, and we got married. I guess about a year later, she moved in with some girlfriends, and we wanted to have sort of a normal dating life for a while, which we did in Dallas. And
All right. And then, so let's start back at the beginning of ministry now. So I started volunteering in ministry when I was in high school. things with like the band and community outreach stuff. When did you two start getting involved in ministry?
When I was a sophomore in high school, and I was in charge of the outreach for our youth group.
All right.
Yeah.
What about you, Brett?
It was in high school, shortly after I became a Christian. I just remember the pastor saying, "We need some help for this." And I said, "Okay." And I got involved right away. So always been involved in the life of the church since becoming a Christian.
And when did you both realize that you wanted to be in ministry as a career path?
For me, it was shortly after becoming a Christian. Really, I was kind of fortunate in that I felt a real call to serve God full time, and I didn't know what my spiritual gifts were. But then when I started teaching the Scripture, I just was like, oh, I really want to go and learn more after college and be trained for the ministry. So it was pretty early on for me. When was it for you, Eve? Probably when I asked you to marry me and I was a pastor. You said that was your call.
Yes, exactly.
So was the church plant something that was talked about early on in your ministry endeavors?
No.
How did that come about? The idea.
Well, because we were both raised in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
and we knew that there was a need for churches. That's how it, I guess, came about.
And were you married at that point? When that got brought up?
Yeah, we were.
We were married. Yeah, we were married. He was working on staff at a large church in Dallas. We were working with single adults. Okay. And then there came a point. How many years did you do that?
I think about 8 years.
Yeah, that's about right.
Working with single adults. Yeah.
You were the pastor of
I was the single adult pastor.
Okay.
In Dallas, there's just thousands of singles. And we had a singles ministry going on, and it reached a point where, do we keep doing this, or do I want to be a pastor? And if I'm going to be a pastor, do we want to go into an existing church, that is, send out your resume, and or do we want to start a church from scratch? And we ended up deciding, let's start from scratch, because then you can
do it how you
whatever you want to do.
Make sure the grass is cut right.
Exactly.
How long?
The need, I think, was a real,
So the
strong
church was started in 1992, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So when did you guys decide you were going to start the church? How long was that process?
The process was about 2 years.
Correct.
I'd say. Yeah.
So you had a newborn.
Yeah.
Who is now on staff.
Angelique.
Yes.
Angelique was 2 years old when we moved to Santa Rosa to officially begin. But the idea of starting the church was probably around 1989, 1990, somewhere in there. And that was just because of feeling like God's moving us out of single adult ministry into being a pastor. And I'd heard some horror stories of pastors that went into existing churches and had a hard time, doing new things, fresh things. It just takes longer. And church planting was becoming more popular then, too. People were going out and starting from scratch.
Yeah, a lot of the churches you hear about now, you see that they started in the 90s, early 2000s. I think all those big churches, Highlands and Elevation, all those churches,
yeah,
right?
the church it was like it was going through a renewal.
Yeah.
And music was changing, and the whole style of the church was
Contemporary.
changing. Contemporary church. So
Rick Warren was instrumental with Saddleback Church.
Was that somebody you two had looked up to and followed quite a bit?
We had, and we had been to one of his conferences as we were deciding, what to do.
Yeah.
And so that was very helpful. We attended one of his conferences while we were still living in Dallas. We came out to California, and then went back with some great ideas and vision.
And did you have a church plant coach or anything like that, or was it you two were just on your own?
Yeah, no, we did. A guy named Mark Platt, who's still a great friend. Mark Platt, I met him at Dallas Seminary, actually. He came in and he said he was a church planter in Northern California. And we're like, oh, really? And he helped pastors that wanted to start churches in Northern California. And so we connected with Mark, and he taught us all kinds of things about how to raise money, how to begin the church, what do you do, and all that kind of thing. So he was a real mentor in the early years of the church and a real inspiration.
There's a lot more to it when you're starting. I mean, I had the opportunity with my dad and my mom to plant a church with them and just saw the intricate details that go into it. What would you say was the most challenging of those?
Yeah, there was a challenge to raise support. Now, fortunately, I was on staff at a really large church, and they knew me and all of that. So for us, sending out your prayer letters, we called it, talking about going to start a church in Northern California, and would you be willing to support the ministry for 3 years? Typically, church planters, it's just you raise money for 3 years because the experts say if you can't raise a church, if you can't get it going self-sustaining in 3 years, it may never happen.
It may never happen.
So when you go to supporters, you say, hey, would you be on our team for 3 years?
Yeah.
And we were able to raise support from friends and the church, and we really had a great sending off, so to speak, sending to Northern California. But the big challenge, I would say, was really in the middle of the first year when, we were going on energy, but after working hard at 6 months and seeing very little results, it was like, okay, what are we going to do now? It was, I realized, I came from a large church, as we said, and it was energetic and a lot of things going on at that church and people coming and all that. And then we start this church and it's like, hey, we're here. Why isn't everybody coming?
Dallas to this area is such a
yes.
huge difference as far as like people understanding what church is and why we're doing it. Why did you end up in Santa Rosa? Because you've told me before, Brett, when I interviewed you about Sacramento being a possibility. So what brought you guys to Santa Rosa?
Well, we had gone up to the Roseville area, which would have been the year I think that Bayside was started. And anyways, we went up there, made our video. We were going to go back and raise money in Dallas. And the last day of our trip here in California, we came up to Santa Rosa to visit Brett's brother, Scott, and his wife, Joyce. And we found out that Joyce was a believer, which was very exciting to us because we hadn't really gotten to know her since we had been in Texas and she was here. And then a lady from across the street came over, a nice neighbor, and she was a strong believer, went to Santa Rosa Bible Church. And both those people were encouraging us to start the church here. So anyways, I was there at the home that afternoon, and then Brett was out playing golf at Oakmont.
Yes.
Yes.
So let me
that's
pick
where
it up.
Yes. Now pick it up.
Jump in. Tag,
so here
tag.
we are. We've got a video of Sacramento area, Roseville, and we're heading back to Dallas to use the video to further raise support. And we're going to start the church in Sacramento. It was Sacramento's been growing. It was really growing in the early 90s. And so we come to say goodbye to my brother. I go out and play golf with him at Oakmont. I'd never been to Oakmont before and never played golf there. But while I'm playing golf, I'm like looking around how beautiful it is, and going, wow, this would be a great place to retire someday. I'm just thinking that to myself. After we've started the church in Sacramento and we get older, we'll come back here.
And get through a pandemic.
Yeah, we'll come back fires. We'll come back to retire at Oakmont. I knew nothing other than this is really a sweet area. It hit me that what a professor had said to me while I was in a seminary classroom, and he said to us students, he said, if you ever want to go start a church, you need to go somewhere where you want to retire.
Light bulb.
Light bulb. Yeah, like, aha.
Okay, God.
And he said the reason is because it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot of time. So go somewhere where you want to retire. And I just came back from playing golf and told Eve, I think the Lord is redirecting us to Santa Rosa. And then what happened?
Well, I was already feeling that because of the conversations in the afternoon. And so I was ready.
You were on board.
I was on board.
I think you started to cry.
I did. Okay.
Eve, you cry?
Funny. And then we went up to the where the round barn was, and we prayed over the area, and the rest is history.
Awesome.
Here we are.
Okay, so Easter 1992, right? Was that
that was
the
our
launch?
First service, Easter 1992.
What do you remember from that day? Do you remember what you spoke on?
Yes, I think I spoke on 2 Corinthians chapter 4.
Were you guys doing the music together on
Yes,
opening
and my
Sunday?
sisters, and then we had another friend from Dallas who helped.
Oh yeah, that's right. Star Dawn and Eve was part of the worship.
And then
That's cool.
another friend had come out from Dallas.
Full circle, see?
Yes.
And Scott was running sound.
No,
not yet.
No,
Okay.
he was
Not yet.
not until about 2 years in, I think.
Oh, okay. I thought he was here from the start.
Yeah.
Well,
he was.
He just
was.
wasn't running sound.
He
yet.
was on.
Okay. Because Scott's a musician also. Was he in the band? Because saxophone, I think. Right?
Yeah, sax and bass, but he
Okay.
was not in the band, no. What were we going to say? Eve, you were going to say something?
Well, I was going to say leading up to Easter, how miraculous it was because we moved here in February, the first week of February. We went to a conference that the Conservative Baptists of Northern California had down in Monterey area. And when we were driving home with the gentleman that you had mentioned, Mark Platt, that's when we decided we needed to go public on Easter Sunday, which only gave us a few months.
April 19th of that year, yes.
Yes, so we only had a few months.
I was thinking maybe we go public. You know, when you have your first official service, 8 months later,
You get
whatever.
your little team together and you have your Bible
Small
study.
group.
Yeah.
And Mark was like, just
Jump
jumped
for it.
in.
Go for it.
Yeah.
It's probably, did you notice that because Easter Sunday is obviously a largely attended
Yes.
Sunday, was it
It's
a
a-
huge drop off to the second week or did that not?
Yeah. To put it mildly, yes.
It's tough to play the numbers. I mean, when
Yeah.
you're planting a church,
It
the
was
numbers
what,
game is
100 to about
We
27?
had over 100 the
Yeah.
first week, and then down to 27.
I think 27.
And we stayed about 27.
We planted our church 2 weeks after Easter from the basically the advice of a church plant coach to say don't do it on Easter because you'll see the drop off. Start on a Sunday that's the least attended.
Interesting.
And so we
yes.
started on a Sunday that was lesser attended, and then we didn't see quite the steep. It was still a big drop off, but yeah. Where were you guys meeting at? What was the building you were in?
We were at the Luther Burbank Center.
Oh, you started there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yes. So that was amazing because basically we had not found any place and we knew that 2 churches were already meeting there. And so we thought, oh, well, there's not going to be a room for a third church, right? But we, at the last moment, like maybe 5 weeks before we were to launch, we drove up there and sure enough, the East Auditorium was available. And so there we were.
For
That's
the next,
awesome.
For the next 15 years.
17 years, I think it was.
17 years we were there.
Cool.
Which meant having kids' classrooms in the hall, nursery in the,
Yeah.
it was very challenging.
Setting up everything
Right.
and all of that. It was discouraging
fun.
trying to find a place.
I'm saying, I'm
no,
saying it
but
was
then
fun.
when Eve was like, let's try the Luther Burbank Center. And I was like, oh, it's not going to be available. And it was.
Are you a pessimist?
At
Can be.
times. At
Can be.
times.
I can
That
be
was-
super optimistic or super pessimistic, like sometimes, because I remember that whole like, where are we going to start the church at kind of thing, and it's just like, nah, this place isn't. Nah. It's
Yeah.
not
Well,
gonna
that
work.
was one of those moments where God just kind of said, hey, you know what? Why don't you go check this out? And
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Lord prompted you.
definitely.
And maybe that's the lesson to learn that God, if he prompts somebody else, don't poo-poo it.
Yeah.
He may be leading.
He's opening a door, don't
He's
slam
open-
it
don't
shut.
Slam it shut.
Yeah.
So that was great to. We set up in those years. Everything was in our garage.
Mobile.
Yeah.
I remember
Well,
seeing a
the first
video of
couple
you
years.
loading everything into your truck.
Yeah, the
I think you showed it
drums
at a team
were
party,
in
yeah.
there, the dividers for the classroom, even the carpet for the classroom, because the Luther Burbank Center just had these, pavement in between.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
So coffee pots, children's toys, you name
But
it.
we did eventually get a closet.
Yeah,
Remember?
that was like a huge blessing. What year was that we got a closet?
After a year or two. I don't know.
A year or
Yeah.
two, we finally could put stuff it
Store
in this
it there so you don't
closet.
have to
Yeah.
drive it there every week.
Right.
So being in ministry, obviously, it's a very unique kind of lifestyle. Has there ever been times where you've wrestled with things that maybe you've given up for ministry, things that you weren't able to do? Instead, family life or, vacationing, just different things as far as what ministry causes you to have to give up.
I think it's so much a part of our lives. We don't think of it as giving up. We just know that that's part of the territory.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of flex with it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and especially you. I think that the wife, I heard also from professors about church planting, and even Mark Platt. It's like if your wife is not on board with this, then you need to wait. I mean, you need to pray it through.
Because it's a huge sacrifice.
Your
I mean, not just
weekends-
church planting, not for the wife, but being in ministry for a spouse
yeah.
is challenge. I mean,
It is.
It's a huge
And
sacrifice.
your weekends are gone. So you have to, like with school and making time for kids and everything.
and you had
it's
2 young
challenging.
kids at the start of this.
Just Angelique.
Well,
was
we had
2.
Angelique 2, and then Josh came.
Oh,
2
what year
years
was
later.
Josh born? 94?
93.
93. Okay. So at the end of the first year or so.
Yeah.
Okay. What about things that you've gained? We don't want to just talk about the loss, but things that you've gained because of ministry.
Friends, lifelong friends.
Our relationship with the Lord has grown.
Yes. A lot of faith. Faith
has grown.
It's so impossible to start a church.
Right.
I mean, especially in Sonoma County, it's really got to be God that does it. And people even told us when we said, we're going to start a church in Santa Rosa, they're like, it'll never work. Yeah. They referred to Sonoma County as the graveyard for,
oh my goodness.
For
That's
church planners. Yeah. And God just, and I've told other church planners this. I've said, listen, if God wants to raise up a church, he'll do it through you. So just take a step of faith. So our faith has grown a lot. We've learned a lot about people. You're still learning a lot about people.
Yeah. But there's a lot. The fact that Kiki is now on staff here and plays
cool.
Not just a small role. She's crucial to everything that we're doing here.
Yes.
And that's got to be so cool just to be able to work with. I loved working with my parents in ministry. And that was one thing that I was really drawn to this church about, was knowing there's so many, basically this is a family here. You had staff that not only is it your daughter, but your niece and her husband.
Yeah.
And then you've got Kath and Erica, who are basically just like a couple of daughters for you guys. Then the Winardis, who have become so close to you. And it was just really cool to see the close-knit group that is. That was a huge draw for Caitlin and I, to know that if a family can work together in ministry, that says something.
Well, and that's encouraging for you to say, because sometimes you could say, oh, it's a family thing, and you'll never break into it. But the Kiki, on staff does a great job of involving people, and the other staff members are so good at reaching out. I'm glad that you felt, because you don't want to feel like an outsider.
Yeah, being from a family that was in ministry together, I know that it's challenging to work together, and so it speaks a lot to the family to be able to work together, successfully. Now, I have a surprise for you. I actually invented a time machine, and you guys are going to go back to 1992. I'm just kidding. I don't think you guys
that's
thought
cool.
Did
No,
you know
got
that
me. That's cool.
No. I've been working on this on the side. No, but what would be one or two pieces of encouragement or advice that you would share with your younger self? And maybe you could even go like Bret giving some advice to Eve, or Eve giving advice to Bret, or yourselves.
Well, you do have to count the cost, because there is going to be a cost. So that would be one piece of advice.
I would say to me, look, focus on immersing yourself in the scriptures. And like now I read through the Bible every year, which I really enjoy. I enjoy doing. I wish I had started it.
How many times have you done that now? Do you know?
It's been probably 7 or 8 years in a row that I've read through the Bible. It's amazing what you pick up around the, number 7 or 8. You start to really see it in a different way. I wish I had started back then. And just focus on building up the people that are coming, taking care of the people. I think that and I think I've mentioned this in another podcast maybe, that the focus when you start a church is like get people in and survive, which is, there's some truth to that. Obviously, you have to work hard. You have to get people in, but that can take a lot of your energy. Yeah. Where if I said to myself, look, just focus, the people who are here, the 27 people that are here, build them up, pastor them, take care of your own spiritual life, deepen it, and give to them, build them up. Not to become an ingrown church, but that you let God cause the growth. Put it that way. You let God do it. And I just expended a lot of energy trying to cause the growth. Well, you can't.
And the thing is, some of this in your head, but you have to walk it out. You have to experience it. Does that make sense? Otherwise, a lot of the principles, that God causes the growth. A lot of these things, that you're going to be stretched, but until you go through it, until you suffer some, just different things that come into your, through your life, it's,
Yeah, you have some families leave the church or something. It's hard,
especially
hard when they're friends, and it's like, I think there's a book saying like it's not personal or something like that. It's about church planting, and it's from a point of view of a church planter saying. People say, well, it's not personal that we're leaving your church. And it's like, no, it feels really personal, though, because
it does.
we've we planted this church together, and
Yeah,
and
you
now
feel
you're
a lot.
leaving, and I don't know, I don't quite understand why, and sometimes they're not honest about it, and it can be kind of a tricky thing.
It is.
I want to ask one more question before we end this one, which is, what are some of the biggest miracles that you saw in that first year?
I still remember coming home. Eve had, in addition to doing all the things she did the day of the first service, I remember coming home. We had lunch together and just thinking, a church has just started. It was just crazy. You know, we had a name, Spring Hills Community Church. We had a bulletin. We had a logo. We had a place to meet. A church just began that didn't exist before. And then it all hit me. We got to do it again next week.
I know, right?
You know, so, but it's just the miracle of, God provided for our support. The church was really self-sustaining. By the second year, it was self-sustaining. So that was like, praise the Lord. But he did it. You know, we stepped out in faith, and it's just beautiful to see, which my big takeaway is that, and I would encourage people listening to this to take it. If you feel prompted by God to do something for his glory, take a step, do it.
Well, finding the place to meet, that was huge. I remember that. And then just getting everything in order. And we did have some friends that helped us from Texas. That was amazing. Miraculous that they helped. And then in that first year, Bret, it came about that another church merged with us, which was very miraculous.
That was really cool.
Ooh, good lead-in for part two.
For part two.
Yes.
And that, just seeing how God provided some really neat people, and that was miraculous. We didn't know that was gonna happen.
God always provides the people.
Yeah, the right people
when
too.
When he's involved,
and it was miraculous for them. They had been without a pastor for over a year, and so it fit.
Yeah, awesome.
So,
well, I think that's a good way to end part one. We're going to jump back into part two next week, and we'll continue on in the story of Spring Hill. So thank you, Bret and Eve, for taking the time today to share with us about that first year.